Professor Coimbra will be speaking on navigating a trauma society and leaving a legacy. Professor Coimbra is the Surgeon-in-Chief of the Riverside University Health System, Professor of Surgery at Loma Linda University, School of Medicine, and the Emeritus Professor at University of California, San Diego. He is also currently the Editor-in-Chief of the Journal of Trauma and Acute Care Surgery, a journal that all of us like to read and hopefully publish in as well. Previously, Dr. Coimbra was the Director of the UCSD Level 1 Trauma Center and the Chief of the Division of Trauma, Surgical Critical Care, Burns and Acute Care Surgery for over 2 decades. He's played a significant role in strengthening San Diego's first Level 1 Trauma Center into one of the top programs of not just the United States, but also a model for trauma centers around the world. He's also had very active participation in global health, and he is the President of the Board of Directors for the World Coalition for Trauma Care, as well as a member of the Global Alliance for the Care of the Injured within the Division of Trauma and Injury Prevention of the World Health Organization. He has served as the Chairman for the Trauma Registry and Data Committee for the World Health Organization as well. Dr. Coimbra has more than 630 scientific publications in most clinical and experimental aspects of trauma, emergency general surgery, surgical critical care, and is clearly very much a global surgical trauma leader, and we look forward to his talk. Professor Coimbra.
Good morning. My name is Raul Coimbra, and it's a great honor to present in this webinar sponsored by the Asian Collaboration in Trauma. And I would like to thank in particular Professor De La Cruz for the kind invitation. I will speak to you today about navigating a trauma society and leaving a legacy. And I will use 2 recent leadership experiences that I had, one as president of the American Association for the Surgery of Trauma, and the other as the executive director of the World Coalition for Trauma Care. I have used the book Good to Great for several years to understand why certain companies or certain groups reach excellence and maintain excellence, while others never get there, or eventually will get there, but will fall and disappear very quickly. This book from Jim Collins divides the strategy for success in 3 phases. And they call this the concept of the flywheel. The flywheel keeps turning, but it's dependent on people, on thoughts, and actions. And we use this strategy in my recent leadership experiences. Jim Collins talks about the importance of having leaders that are effective, level 4 leaders, or even above level 4, what they call level 5 leaders, which are those that build enduring greatness through a paradoxical blend of personal humility and professional will. So the difference between a level 5 leader is a level 4 leader is that a level 5 leader always asks first who and then what, while a level 4 leader usually asks first what and then who. As you can see the difference, first who means that you get the right people on board and build a superior team before you start thinking about what. Once you have the right people, you can figure out the path to greatness, whereas level 4 leaders do it the opposite way. They need to set a vision and then develop a roadmap, and then they enlist members to make that vision happen. Both may be successful, and both may be good strategies, and I will describe this to you. In my opinion, and the leadership experiences that I've learned from my mentors who are great leaders and from my own experiences in life, I think it always starts with the team. So the real question is, who is on your team? Who is on the bus and who is going to get off the bus? I think it's important that you surround yourself with the right people before you start. And the real question is, are we a team? So what is it? Is it a small number of people? Maybe we share common goals, we share the rewards for achieving the goals, and we share the responsibilities also for achieving those goals. But more importantly, team members are those that set aside their individual or personal needs for the greater good of the group. Now, there are several reasons why teams fail. One, absence of trust between the team members. Two, fear of conflict. People hold back and don't speak up and don't express their thoughts. There is a lack of commitment of working as a team. Maybe there is avoidance of accountability, and there is inattention to results. And those things may make any strategy fail. So if you don't have the right people aligned to have trust, to deal with conflict, to develop a significant sense of commitment, to be accountable to each other and to the projects, and to pay attention to the results, things are gonna not go well. So once you build your team, the second thing is the discipline thought. You need to confront the difficulties, the brutal facts, the reality, but you need to have disciplined thought to develop your strategies and your tactics. And this ends the build-up phase, and perhaps when you get to that point, you are going to start the breakthrough phase where progress will be felt and will be observed. So this is the phase that you make things happen. And then the third phase is when the breakthrough phase is ongoing and you're reaching the peak, is about sustainability of the peak. And then you need to have disciplined action to maintain the group engaged and the activities and the tactics and strategies that you've developed ongoing. So let me give you the AAST example. I was president between 2016 and 2017. As you know, the AAST is an organization that has basically 3 domains: trauma, which was very well established, surgical critical care, that was also very well established in the AAST, but required some work. And more recently, we embraced the emergency general surgery and we put these 3 domains together. We call it acute care surgery. It turns out the emergency general surgery was missing some components for the AAST to have complete ownership of the acute care surgery domain as a specialty. So our interpretation at that point was that the acute care surgery model was incomplete. We didn't have complete ownership of acute care surgery. We had a great training model. We have a fellowship. We were missing some clinical, some research, verification and accreditation, and data collection or registry components in emergency general surgery. So we set up a retreat to gain ownership of acute care surgery, to enhance surgical critical care status, to engage the membership of the organization, and to redirect the organization. And how did we do that? Picking the people first. So these were the leaders that I was honored to have on the team, sitting around the table and starting brainstorming about the ideas to make sure that the AAST at the end of this process would have a pathway towards the future to have complete ownership of acute care surgery. Some of them are presenting in this webinar. So we start by building trust. And to establish real trust, team members, beginning with the leader, must be willing to take risks without a guarantee of success. When we sat down for the first time, we knew that we had a job to do, but we were not sure that we would be successful doing that job. Obviously, people have different ideas, so we need to learn how to master conflict. Conflict is always a little uncomfortable. Most people don't like conflict. People usually feel under attack. They take it personally when there is conflict, when ideas don't match, when people have different points of view. But the question is this a reason to avoid conflict? Can conflict be productive? Is this a reason to hold back your opinions just because somebody else that you perceive is more important or more relevant to the organization or occupies a higher position, thinks differently than you? Would you prefer not to be listened, not to have a voice and hold back? I always say that conflict, to me, is a good thing. Unresolved conflict is a bad thing. So conflict leads to new ideas. Unresolved conflict leads to failure. Obviously, sitting down around that table, we had to achieve commitment. And commitment, in that case, was not consensus. We didn't have to reach consensus to have commitment. We need to be committed to sit at that table and ratchet out and discuss all the strategies and tactics that we would implement, whether we reach consensus or not. So a commitment is about a group of intelligent, driven individuals buying into a decision precisely when they don't naturally agree with them or with most of them. It's really the ability to defy a lack of consensus. Although we don't have consensus, we are still committed to the cause. And people say that they don't really need to have their ideas adopted. So, in other words, you don't need to reach 100% consensus. Most people just want to have their ideas heard. So the great leaders are good listeners. And that's what we did with our retreat in the AAST. And at the end of the day, we developed several strategies in several domains. I'll present two of them. One was the clinical quality and education domain. So we decided that we had to get into the business of developing clinical practice guidelines in all three domains of acute care surgery: trauma, surgical critical care, and emergency general surgery. We work on developing the optimal resource document for verification of emergency general surgery centers in the United States, the way we did with trauma several decades ago. We worked on the development of the EGS National Registry, a data entry tool that's currently being developed as a branch of NISQIP. We developed a disease grading system in emergency general surgery that we didn't have. We increased the emergency general surgery content in our annual meeting. Obviously, if we want to own emergency general surgery, the AAST annual meeting has to have EGS content. And we want to assess the effectiveness of our acute care surgery fellowship, our training program, which encompasses trauma, surgical critical care, and emergency general surgery. In research, we want to continue our presence, our strong presence and leadership in the Center for National Trauma Research. We want to use the clinical research agenda that we publish in JTEX to guide the research projects and scholarships given by the AAST. We want to further develop a even more comprehensive research agenda in trauma, and Dr. Eileen Bolger is responsible for that. We created an emergency general surgery research agenda to enhance research in that field. We create and develop a surgical critical care research agenda. We create an acute care surgery research network to have multi-institutional studies done with emergency general surgery and surgical critical care, not only in trauma. And we want to produce high-quality clinical studies in acute care surgery in all three domains. We use basically a matrix, and this is just an example. So we have goal number one here, the development of critical practice guidelines, what the goal was, what the timeline was, the teams that would be responsible for achieving those goals. So team one and the strategy one, team two with a strategy two. Here are the goals, published three guidelines over time. And so you have the timeline, you have the goals, you have the strategies, and you have the team. So this matrix is very important for any professional organization to stay organized in their goals. We also enhance our education, not only with the fellowship, but partnering with the European Society of Trauma and Emergency Surgery and develop the emergency surgery course, which is now taught all over the world. Well, once that process is started and we had those things defined and the real work started after that, we need to make sure that we were all accountable to that process. Otherwise, the process would not happen and all the plans would die. So peer-to-peer accountability was very important. And what that means is that we had the responsibility to track progress against its goals. So the AAST became an organization that, instead of committees or those teams meeting once or twice a year over the phone and once during the annual meeting, we were meeting every month with the groups and making sure that everyone remained engaged and accountable to achieve those goals. That was a very important component for the success of that problem, process. And the matrix was critical for us to measure and to document accountability and to track the process to make sure that the goals were being achieved. And at that point, we all felt very good, and we understood that opportunity leads to ownership, and responsibility equals accountability that equals ownership. So we became responsible for what we want to do. We were accountable for what we were doing, and therefore we owned it. So obviously it takes ownership to do great things, and we focus on the results. And this was the last step of this process. Now we have 95% of those goals that we set up to accomplish in 5 years, accomplished in 3 years, which was remarkable, was phenomenal. But why did that happen? Because we trust one another. We engaged in healthy conflict around issues. We commit to the decisions that we made. And we held one another accountable for those decisions. And when you do that, there is a pretty good chance that you're going to make it. There is a pretty good chance that you're going to be successful. The second example is the World Coalition for Trauma Care, which, as you know, was created in 2012 during the first World Trauma Congress in Rio. How did we do it? We did the same way I described to you for the AAST process. This is the moment of the creation of the World Coalition for Trauma Care. There is a team at the table. We had the most important leaders of trauma surgery in the world, representing all continents. As you can see, Professor Otomo is right there, who has been a great partner for me. But there are other important people, Mike Rotondo, Paul Homans from Germany, LG Britt from the United States, folks from Australia, Austria, United States and India and Brazil. We brought the leaders together and developed a strategy to be successful in the future. We embraced a number of important professional organizations. This was not about individuals, but this was about individuals bring their professional organizations to the table. So this is truly a global coalition. We partner with a number of professional organizations all over the world. And that was what made this successful. So we set our goals. We said we are going to meet every 2 years, and we have done so. And I'm glad to inform to you that the 6th World Trauma Congress will be held in Tokyo under the leadership of Professor Otomo next year in September. So with this, I'm going to close, and I'm going to thank you again for the opportunity to present in this very important webinar. Thank you very much.